Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar week where we are celebrating 20 years of WordPress. My name is Danish and I am a community manager at Cloudways. Today, we have a very special guest, Francesca Marano, with us. Francesca is a director of engineering, learning, and growth at uh, XWP. The topic of today's session is a non developer release leads journey. Without a further ado, I would request you, Francesca, to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, Cloudways. I'm really happy to be here today and be able to share my journey. So it starts in the summer of 2019, specifically the core journey. I was asked to help out with a WordPress release. A few months before, this was part of an initiative that a few months before the core team representatives started. They reached out to other WordPress teams in an effort to increase the diversity of the release team. At the time, I was already involved in the WordPress ecosystem, especially in the community team, but I had no experience or knowledge of how WordPress was being made from the software point of view. I knew about the community, but not so much about the software. So still, when Josefa Hayden, the executive director of the WordPress.org open source project, pinged me, I said yes without hesitation. So since then, I co-led three major releases. I served as the core team representative. I'm now in the process of contributing to WordPress 6.3, the current release, and preparing for WordPress 6.4, the last release of 2023. All of this without writing a single line of code, much to everyone's relief, I have to say. So, just a step back to tell you a little bit more about my WordPress journey, not just about my contribution to core. I started building websites in 1999, and around 2008, I started a blog, a family blog, and I started using WordPress. And I had experience with CSS and PHP and HTML, so I started playing around with websites. I started getting to know WordPress better, and I started to build WordPress websites for clients around 2010. But I never ever thought that I could contribute to WordPress because I wasn't a backend developer. And in my mind, the project only needed PHP developers, basically. And also, I didn't really know how WordPress was made or how open source worked exactly, how I could contribute. So I didn't really approach that and continue using WordPress as a tool to make money for my family. But then in 2015, I had a series of casual, and completely random encounters with people that were actually involved in the WordPress project, both at the local level, at the international level, and they encouraged me to help how I could. And I thought it was a great way to give back to the tool that actually made it possible for me to pay my rent. I started contributing to the polyglots team, so I highly encourage you, if you know one language beside American English, to find the local team so you can translate WordPress in your language. I attended a few word camps. I loved the community, so I decided to become more actively involved with the team. The picture here is the inaugural WordCamp Torino, which was held in the spring of 2016. And this is a group of the volunteers. And if you have been to a WordCamp, you know that there's a lot of work going behind the scenes. So in 2019, as I said, I was pulled into the wonderful world of core, and I really didn't know how it worked, but there's a lot of documentation and there's a lot of support from other members of the team. So how does WordPress get made? How does the release cycle look like? So the release cycle went through a number of iterations, of course, in the last 20 years, and it has really evolved from its grassroots open source project early days. Up until WordPress 5.9, a release was led mostly by 1 to 3 people, generally core committers. And then when WordPress 5.0 came around, which is the release that saw the merge of the block editor Gutenberg, it was such a massive undertaking that it needed a bigger team to orchestrate all the moving parts. And so the release squad model was born. As you can see from the numbers here, there is a lot of people involved in making WordPress. And the number of the release cycle days, which you see here as 163, hasn't changed massively since the early days of the project. There are always between 2 to 4 releases per year. But the number of people involved has grown exponentially. So, as you can imagine, from one release lead to having 22 people in the release squad, it's a big difference. And these are the numbers from the last version of WordPress 6.2 Dolphy. What's also interesting is the 600 contributors took part in the release, and 178 were new contributors. So their first contribution to core was received during this cycle. And it's an impressive number because it's 1/3 of all the people involved in the release in terms of contributors. And also the team is getting bigger and more diverse each version, with new people joining and more experienced people supporting. So it's a really great model to make a WordPress release more sustainable for everyone. WordPress is using a time-based release process and not a feature-ready one, which means that the date of the release is decided in advance, and the features that are ready by the time beta 1 comes around will be included in the current release. Everything else gets postponed, also called punting. If there isn't enough movement in a ticket, it may be punted to the next release if it's already in a good working state, or if it needs still a lot more work, it will be put in the future release milestone and will be addressed, with every release. It will be people will say, hey, what about this ticket? And depending on what is the status of the ticket, it might be included in this, or again being punted. And this is an ongoing process. Each release goes through the following phases, more or less, and some blend into another, but more or less these are the phases. The first one is obviously the planning and securing all the focus leads. This is done in the Slack core channel and the Make core blog. After the previous release is done and people get a good rest, work picks up slowly but surely. Contributors start releasing the new, start discussing the new release. Usually a post gets published with a call for volunteers and people can express their interest in being part of the release. And again, this is a process that I've seen many iteration over the years. Core also used to post something about what do you want to see in the next version of WordPress? So people that had tickets, that worked on tickets, that something was dear to their heart or they worked on it, would bring it up and say, hey, it would be great to see this ticket merge, and discussion would ensue. And this has worked for many years. However, since now, as the project said, everything is a block. So there is an increased focus on working on the block editor, which is now not just used in posts and pages, but across the whole website. So Gutenberg, well, more correctly, the block editor has been the main focus for all the releases from WordPress 5.0. This doesn't mean that there is no work done in core. There is still a lot of work done in core because, of course, we need to ensure that we keep moving forward and we keep developing new features or fix existing problems and improve the overall experience.
Uh,
Phase
so,
two.
like I would like to include into it, like if you are a beginner WordPress developer or you are a marketeer, so can you participate in the, in like you can say in a core Slack channel? So is there any certain requirements to participate in the channels, or
Absolutely not. Just get an account. You need a WordPress.org account. So if you go to WordPress.org slash register, I think you can get a WordPress.org account. And then with a WordPress.org account, which is going to be an alias of one of your emails, you can go to make.wordpress.org slash Slack and you get the instructions to join Slack. Um, and WordPress has one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Slack instance in the world, and there are over 30,000 people in it. And you can join at any time and discuss contribution. So Slack, the WordPress Slack is for contribution to WordPress, whether to is core or any of the other makewordpress.org teams. There are around 20 right now, so there are many ways to contribute to WordPress. Core is just one of them.
great, I got my answer. And I also asked this question for the audience, like who
Yes,
are developers and who want to contribute into the WordPress, so how they can contribute. So
yes.
that's a good answer. Thanks.
Thank you. First
You
step,
can continue.
wordpress.org, get an account, and everything else will come more or less. And sign up for the blogs so you can see what's going on.
Great.
So, uh, phase two is the longest phase, is where development work really begins and it picks up. It's where the majority of the work is done. It's the alpha period, we can call it, and there are regular synchronous chats, bug scrubs, triage sessions to make sure that, as many tickets and as many features as possible get addressed, but also while keeping an eye on the timeline that the release has. There's a lot of movement around those dates, around this period on track, which is the WordPress bug control tool. And as I said, the Slack is open. There are over 30,000 people in it, and WordPress being a global community, if you have any questions around contributing to WordPress, core, design, themes, whatever you're passionate about, I'm pretty sure there's going to be someone that is going to be able to reply to you in any given time zone. It might take a while to get replies because everyone is a volunteer, but I see movement all the time. So this is the part of the active development on a particular branch of WordPress, which I'll address in a minute. Then we get into phase three, which is the beta period. So historically, in software development, beta period is for testing and nothing else. WordPress has experimented with different beta periods, but right now, bug fixes are allowed on the beta period, but no new features or enhancements can be introduced. So it means that this is it can be a period of 2 to 4 weeks, usually depending on the length of the release and its complexity, of course. But during this period, everyone is invited to test the current release of WordPress, to open bug reports if you find any bug that is, introduced in this release, but also to make some smaller fixes that have been, waiting for their time to come. After this period, we get into phase four, which is the release candidate period. So at this point, and this is for every piece of software, by the way, it's not just WordPress. A release candidate is a version of the software that is ready. But it still needs to be tested. We want to cross all the T's, dot all the I's to make sure that this is the best we can do. At this point, work is targeted only to major bugs that have been introduced during the current cycle. So no more features, no more enhancement, no more bug fixes. If they're, all the bug fixes, so no more defect work. There is a lot of testing going on, and the team might decide to introduce additional release candidate dates to make sure that everything is addressed to the best of everyone's ability before we get to the final phase, which is the general release. So WordPress is launched and made available in the WordPress admin for updates, or even better, auto updates if you have them turned on. And as I said, some phases blend into each other. So the development of WordPress doesn't happen only during the allocated release period, it happens all year round. Trunk is the directory of Subversion, which is the name of the WordPress version control system. Contains the latest development code in preparation for the next major release cycle. Actually, the one that is being worked on right now. So the code that is being worked on right now is in a directory called Trunk. And during the release candidate period, Trunk gets branched, which means, to oversimplify it, there are now two versions of WordPress that are being worked on. The tree analogy is really helping visualize how it happens. So you have the current main branch, which is Trunk, being prepared for the general release, and a new one in alpha mode where changes can be merged in preparation for the release after that. Also, this is something that the core contributors have been discussing over the years. When is the right moment to branch? Is it during beta? Is it during release candidate? Both of them have pros and cons. Nowadays, WordPress trunk gets branched at release candidate to not having to have too many changes being backported to alpha. If you're a developer, probably this mechanism is very familiar to you. If you're not, just think of a tree with a main branch and a secondary one. This is what is being developed right now. This is what's going to happen in the next release. Who knows? We might change this, but it's always an open conversation, and it's great that it can happen. For me personally, the thing that I love the most about this release model, this Teresa squad, is that it introduced a variety of roles in it. So, of course, there are developers, right? But there are also designers, marketers, accessibility experts, performance experts, documentation, technical writers, and project managers. Because WordPress is not only made of code, and it's great to see that a lot of different skills come together to contribute to it. The release coordinator role, which is the one that I covered in the past releases and also in the current one right now with Hector, is to keep an eye, or at least to try to keep an eye on all the moving part. And I say try because there's a lot of moving part. And this is why there are also focus leads, because they focus on a specific area, and then they can update the release coordinator and say, this is going well, this is blocked, and all together we come together to unblock as many people and as many focus areas as possible. Some areas might require focus lead for a specific release. For example, when a new default theme is released together with a WordPress version, then you will also have a design lead and a development lead. And for example, the performance focus lead has been introduced in WordPress 6.2, I believe, and it's also active in 6.3. And I think this is a role that is going more or less to stay in the release squad, because obviously it's a very important topic for the tech industry, and so it's a very important topic for the WordPress industry. And not only a release is made of different skills and people, but also core itself, the code base, is so vast that is divided into components, which are specific areas. The REST API is one of them. The comments, if you're a blogger, The comments are always relevant. User roles and capabilities. There are a lot of components, and they are overseen by maintainers. They are responsible to look after, their specific area, and they oversee how tickets are going, how tickets are moving uh, during the release. So, they check how many new tickets they have in the component, how many are getting worked on actively. And as I said before, if there isn't enough movement, they might decide to punt that specific ticket to another release. And ultimately, they evaluate if a ticket is ready to be merged. When a ticket is ready to be merged, core committers enter the scene. Now, core committers are uh, somewhat small group of people. We used to have around 70, now there are less, that have direct access to WordPress core, so they can commit directly to trunk. They do a final review of the ticket. They might request some changes, or they might make the changes themselves while committing. And probably this is the thing that has surprised me the most, is how actually long it may take to commit a ticket, because if you want to check for all the dependencies and check historical data, what is this, the deeper you go, the older you go in the different components of WordPress, the more difficult it is to actually touch it without touching something else. So this is really
Yeah.
important that there is this manual check, and it's not just, okay, the code passes all the automated tests and we're just going to commit it. In my mind, this was like a one click install, but it's not. And so that's also still a lot of work in this part of the release. Finally, my favorite part, when the release is ready, we celebrate with a party. So I don't know who started calling them release parties and or when they started in this format. I know that since WordPress 5.3, I hosted quite a few of them, and they were really a lot of fun. Um, on the day of one of the steps of the release, it might be one of the betas, one of the release candidates, or the general release, the core channel becomes very active. A lot of people join to see how WordPress gets released. There are multiple steps, there are multiple people involved. Some roles are very specific because you need to have a certain access to the code base to be able to perform those actions and tasks. So you always need a core committer, and you always need a person that has the so-called mission control access, which is the highest level of access in the WordPress code base. And then, you know, there's all the people that join and test the release, and they might raise questions, or they might raise, maybe when they update WordPress they see some bugs, so they will either discuss it in the channel or create a new ticket. But it's really a joyful moment. So everything is documented in the core handbook, and there's a number of steps, and we go through each one of them so people can follow along.
I would like to announce the giveaway for our audience. Like you people have a chance to like earn 100 hosting credits, $100 hosting credits by answer the simple question. And the question is, what will be the composition of WordPress 6.4 version? And the first five comments consider as a giveaway winner. And we will announce the winner by wrapping up this webinar week. So here's the question: that what will be the composition of WordPress 6.4 version to earn $100 hosting credits? So Francesca, you can continue.
Thank you. I was waiting for the people to send in their their answers and see who's the
Yeah.
quickest. Okay, so we'll continue. And this is actually, I'm glad we stopped on this slide, because this is also something that brings me an immense joy. So the biggest part is, of course, the general release day. And there is this one specific moment which I find incredibly powerful. So WordPress has a download counter, And you can see it by going to wordpress.org/counter. I checked before the beginning of this presentation, and it was around the 77 million websites. So during the general release party, before releasing the new version, someone from the release squad is tasked with taking a screenshot of the previous one where the counter stops and, it restarts with the new version. So we all say goodbye and welcome. And I have here is an old a screenshot that I had. So when WordPress 5.5 was released, the last screenshot we took of WordPress 5.4 was close to 60 million people. And on the right, you can see WordPress 5.5 has been downloaded and it's almost to 500,000 people. And that happens in a minute, probably even less. So this is very virtual, right? It happens online, but it has something tangible about it. I don't know if it's the numbers or the fact that we take a screenshot, and this moment will never cease to amaze me and excite me because we made WordPress once again all together. And I'm sure you heard this already. Contributing to core is not only for developers. That's like a tagline that I think every contributor day has. And I really hope that my experience can encourage you to check out make.wordpress.org/core and get into the core Slack channel so you can you can directly observe how people with all those different skills I told you about come together to make WordPress. I
Yeah.
would say that the main requirement to contribute to WordPress and to core is, of course, being willing to help and also having, the patience to take some time to read the documentation and maybe attend some dev chats to start to seeing how things move and ask a lot of questions. I think I've never seen anyone coming into the core channel and say, "Hey, I would like to start contributing to core," not getting an answer. In many cases, the answer might be read the documentation, but with contributors, existing WordPress contributors generally care to bring in more people. And as exciting as being an active part of a release is, and seeing my name up there as a release co-lead or as a noteworthy contributor, I have to say that my biggest achievement as a WordPress contributor has been mentoring other people on their contribution journey. I am a second generation woman in tech, and my passion is to help other women and non binary folks navigate the tech industry, and especially in leadership positions. And WordPress as a project has made great progress in becoming more diverse and inclusive. Part of the efforts are being done and have been done in what is called women and non-binary folks-led release. There has been one already, WordPress 5.6, and we are already working towards the next one, which is going to be the last one for 2023. You can see all the details in the core blog, and I think the easiest way to see what's happening is just coming to Slack and join the core channel. And we also have a specific channel for the squads. One is 6-3 squad or whatever the name, but you'll find it if you put the number of the
Okay.
release in it and you see how all of this happens. And after 8 years of contributing, I know that the biggest obstacle we all face as contributor is our most precious resource, time. And I really believe and I encourage everyone in finding the right balance between being selfless and contribute to open source for the greater good, which is making the open web accessible and a better place for everyone, but also being selfish, contribute to grow professionally and personally. I have to say that thanks to WordPress, I went from freelancing to working with some of the biggest names in the industry. I found friends. I traveled the world. I met my life partner. I improved my English 8 years ago. I would never have been able to give a presentation in English. And I also learned skills that I use every day as part of my day job. So people and project management, conflict resolution, product ownership, and anything you can think of. And it goes without saying that COVID pandemic affected also the engagement of contributors with the project. So for over 2 years, many of us had pressing personal circumstances that made us pause our contribution. And in addition, not being able to meet in person made it harder to recruit, onboard, and retain new contributors because documentation is great. And I have to say, the project as a whole, every team makes a lot of effort to have documentation for onboarding as updated as possible. But ultimately, sitting next to someone and hear them, have them guide you through your first step is usually smoother. And luckily, the future is looking promising. So I don't know if you heard, but at the beginning of May, the World Health Organization declared over not well, not COVID, but at least the global sanitary emergencies. And this is already showing in the amount of in-person events that are being reactivated or are just starting. And you can find one next to you. So, and this is also another thing, right, about WordPress. If you go to your dashboard, so you log into your WP admin, there is a widget that is events near you. And if you don't see it in your dashboard, you just need to toggle it in the settings for the WP admin page, and you will see all the WordPress related event in a 15 miles radius. I don't know that. I should have checked. But basically, you can see all the WordPress events around you. And honestly, WordPress and the open web need a lot of help to thrive and move forward. So if you haven't considered contributing yet, now is the time. So that would be all for me. I try to keep it brief to have time for questions if there are any. My name is Francesca Marano. I'm the Director of Engineering, Learning, and Growth at XWP, and I hope to see you around the WordPress project soon. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Francesca. The presentation is awesome and very insightful. So I have a question. Actually, I have a two question, but I try to sum it up. Like, what inspired you as a non-developer to take on the role of a release lead for the WordPress 5.3 and subsequent versions, and how did you prepare yourself for the responsibilities and challenges of being a release lead
Yes.
without a technical background?
So it is really a team effort. So I think this is what has um, dramatically changed how people approach core. I would never have done that as a single release lead because I wouldn't know like, what do we do with the REST API? I don't know. What do we do with the REST API? So knowing that it's a team and everyone has their specialty, and so, I don't need to know what's up with the REST API. I will ping the core tech lead, or I will ping directly the component maintainers for the REST API and ask, what's going on with your part of core? How are you moving forward? Is there anything blocking you? Can we help somehow? So knowing that it's a group effort and that knowing that there's also kind of a group of people that have been involved with core for a long time at different levels, but mostly coming from a development background. And when you have some doubts, you can always count on them and they will help you. That has really helped me say, sure, I can do it because I know that I'm not going to do it alone. It's going to take a whole team. And everyone is really supportive. I think I asked some very dumb questions, and no one has ever made me feel like I was asking a dumb question. Like it was a valid question because that was my first time doing it. And this is also great.
That's insightful. Thanks for the presentation and thanks to appear in our live sessions. Thank Francesca for your time and thanks to everyone who join us. We are done with our day three of webinar week, and we have 2 more days where we will have some interesting session. Like we have a panel discussion on website care and maintenance as a retention and upselling tool with Brent Weaver and some of the folks from the from the agencies who are expert in the agency. And we have another session on WPCLI for PHP developers with Milana Sep. So
My colleague.
once again, so yeah, colleague, and she was also in our
Yes.
session based on women in WordPress. That was a very good session, and we
Yeah,
got some good engagement on it, and people like it, and people
I'm
talk
glad.
about it. And I saw on the Twitter. So thanks
Thanks.
once again. Thanks, Francesca. I know you are a very busy person and you have a lot of things to do in your life. And thank you for accepting the invite and presenting your insightful story of being in a release team, and inspire others that who are thinking to contribute in the WordPress core and other teams as well.
Yes. Thank you
Thank
for
you everyone
inviting me.
for joining. Thank you. Bye bye.